Everybody can hear us. Thank you for joining us this evening. In all seriousness, this is IPI Comics, Heroes, Horror, and Holmes. And, there's photos being taken. Yes. So I'm your moderator, Derek McCaw. I run a site called fanboyplanet.com, and I have been friends with Chris Sequeira, who is the editor of IPI, who unfortunately could not be here tonight. So I've been friends with him for years, and through him I've met all these wonderful people that we get to talk with tonight. So please introduce yourselves. We'll start with you. Maybe you need no introduction, Jim.
No, I do. Let's set the record straight.
Okay.
No, I'm Jim Krueger. I'm probably best known for writing Earth X for Marvel, the whole X trilogy. Got an Eisner for Justice. Did lots of work with Alex Ross. Right now, I'm writing prose, like YA novels for Steve Aoki, and I have all kinds of things I get to do in Hollywood. I love monsters a lot, and I got to do a lot about Dracula this past year. So, and there's an announcement of something tonight. So
there will be, and
very excited.
Also,
thank you.
By coincidence, we live like a mile apart, so it's nice. Anyway, down to Dana.
Yes. Hi, I'm Dana. I also live close to Jim, so we must be close.
We must be close
then.
as well,
Yeah, I'm in
yes.
Sherman Oaks.
By the transitive theory of geometry.
Yeah.
I was told there'd be no math. Okay.
Sorry, I'll go. So I'm Dana. I'm a TV writer, screenwriter, and I also write comics. The first comic I wrote was through Jim, so a comic book called Neon Future, produced by Steve Aoki. So we're in the Steve Aoki clan, but work a lot in genre and horror. And I'm writing for the Human Fly reboot series that IPI is publishing.
Which we will talk about
later.
Talk
about.
Yes.
I'm Alan Brewer, and I'm not writing for this series, but I'm a co-owner of this Human Fly franchise, Human Fly character. That's one of the IPI releases, the first one of which is just now out. And I'm also involved in film production, music creation for film and television as well. But in this context, basically with Tony, co-owner of the Human Fly character and franchise.
I am Tony Babinski. I'm a writer. I wrote the second story in the first issue of the Human Fly. I'm also, I guess, the creative director of the Human Fly franchise. We have the comic coming out. We're working on a feature film. I also wrote the official history of Cirque du Soleil, and I work on big events like the FIFA World Cup and stuff like that. And but I'm also a long-time comics fan, and I think it's really fun to be here with all of you. So thanks for coming. It's nice.
Right. So we'll focus on a little bit the origins of this publishing company. This is, I think, the first year that it's actually that IPI got into Diamond, and they've had some books out this year in American comic stores. I probably didn't mention they are from Australia originally, and they come from IFWG Publishing. So we're going to talk a little bit about prose novels and anthologies as well, because IFWG has been very active, doing a lot for 15 years. They do novels, novellas, poetry, criticism, sci-fi, fantasy, horror, and big in the YA market. So I don't know why I sounded surprised there. I apologize, because I know the YA market is huge. So they have just released, or they're going to release, and Jim, we can talk about this because you're in this. If you were in the Burbank area this last Sunday, the horror-themed bookstore Dark Delicacies got a bunch of copies of Nosferatu Unbound ahead of time. And so this is a book that is both fiction story. I think you have a story in there, and it's got a mix of established greats and up and comers. There's
and then there's Jim Krueger. So what is that?
What are you? Eisner Award-winning Jim Krueger. I thank you for not making me have to say it. I just said it. Anyway, that Dacre. I'm sure I mangled his name. Dacre Stoker. added in so he could give the Bram Stoker family perspective. The Dracula Society chair has an essay, a photo-supported section on visits to the actual locations where Nosferatu was filmed, the original Nosferatu, not the upcoming remake. Intro by Dracula and vampire scholar Leslie Klinger, and it will be released in September, although I think we established there are still some copies at Dark Delicacies. If you are in the Los Angeles area, you can get it ahead of time. But Jim, do you want to talk a little bit about your story in here? Because I know we're like slowly establishing the Krueger-verse with short stories
Wow.
in the IFWG.
Yeah, well, the story I wrote is a thing called The Doorman, and it's about a doorman in New York City who confronts one of the guests in their apartment building, and he followed him and he took pictures and of this guy, and he says, "I know what you are. You're one of the Nosferatans. You're a vampire, blah, blah, blah." And the guy defends himself by saying, "I guess I can't just defend myself by saying I'm just a normal psycho killer." And they said no. And then what happens is the vampire kind of confronts the doorman and begins to talk about all the doors over his long existence that he's walked through. And it ultimately builds to the ultimate plight of the vampire.
Cool.
And it ends messy, as vampire movies should, or vampire stories should.
Should, yes.
Yeah.
You have another one coming up in the Into the Cthulhu-verse anthology. It's got you, Jonathan Mayberry, Joe R. Lansdale, Cat Play, Ramsey Campbell. It will be released in March of 2025. And this book looks so dang cool. Which is following on anthologies, which I think you're involved in as well. Maybe Cthulhu Down Under. So this was the first book that they got into the comic book store direct market. It's been a huge success there, and more of the series will be coming. It is edited by Stephen Proposh, IPI Comics editor Chris Sakara, who, like I said earlier, was not able to join us tonight, and Bryce Stevens. But now we get to focus really on Jim Krueger.
As if we haven't been.
So,
Look at Jim.
no, very excitedly, you were telling me about this on Sunday, because I was at Dark Delicacies when you were signing. The Haunted Night is the first volume of Christmas horror stories by you?
Yeah, so I've been working on this forever. I love, I said I love monsters, but I love monsters and I love Christmas, and kind of, it's for me, it's all about Halloween to Christmas. And so what this is this book's going to have 13 haunted Christmas stories, and it would be called The Frankincense Monster and Other Creepy Christmas Stories, and it would say Oh Haunted Night Book 1, and then next year there'll be another 12 that come out, and next year's book will be called I Saw Mommy Killing Santa Claus and Other Twisted Holiday Tales.
And we're recording an album for that, right?
Well, the hope is that because this is 13 stories and next year's will be 12 stories, my plan was to create an advent calendar of holiday horror. So you could read a short story every day, and some of them are scary and some of them are strange kind of prequels, like there's a story about how Santa got his wife, and another story that's a prequel to Christmas Carol, in which it's about Marley begging the Christmas spirits to save Scrooge and what he has to do to ultimately save his business partner. And then there's stories that are funnier but more diabolical, like Poison Cookies and things like that. And just it's monsters and it's holidays, and we love Nightmare Before Christmas, but it goes back before that. I mean, you could Christmas Carol is a ghost story. You could even say that the Little Match Girl is a ghastly Christmas haunted story. And so the idea of this, I think, fits. And I also think there's a melancholy about the holidays, there's a melancholy about Christmas, and it's something that probably should haunt us.
Yeah, isn't it in the line, the most wonderful time of the year, the Christmas song, that they say there'll be lots of ghost stories?
Yeah.
And it used to be a tradition. Let's bring it back. Thank you,
Yeah.
Jim.
Oh, and there's a story in there that's a true story, but it began as a Christmas present, or it began as a Christmas present, and it's a story about my mom who lived in Nazi-occupied Poland, and about a doll that she was forced to give up, and give to a little girl who I'm going to call a little monster for the sake of keeping the theme. But what's amazing about this true story is, okay, I'm wrecking this one, is 50 years later, the doll was returned to my mom.
For reals?
For real. I mean, it's just a head at this point,
Was
but,
it
you know.
haunted?
And did it just show up or someone
No,
actually
no, no.
returned?
She actually, the little
It
girl,
walked in.
the little girl who I said was a monster, her name was Gudrun. And she ultimately wanted coffee with my mom when my mom was in Germany. And in the midst of their coffee, she tells about all her grandchildren that give her a hard time all the time about how she took this little girl's doll, who it was the only thing she had in her entire life, and blah, blah, blah. And my mom, and she says, I've taught my children, my grandchildren, you know, never to want what other people have. And, you know, my mom taught me and my brother always to be willing to give something up if someone else really wants it. And so it's like this doll that haunts, and, you know, it may not quite fit in the story, but at least there's a decapitation.
We were worried there wasn't. We were all worried.
Oh, I can't wait for that book. I really. So let us turn to the comics now. IPI made a debut with Bristlemouth, I think was the one that was first released in the U.S. through Diamond. And so it's released in March. It's a combination of creator-owned and obviously licensed properties, and there's negotiations for more than what we're going to talk about tonight. Traditional comics and manga, because we can't not do manga, right? So it's known for quality, and the first, after Bristlemouth that's out here is, I think the first 3 volumes were a reprint. I think I heard that Tokyo Pop or Viz had originally published The Dreaming by Queenie Chan maybe 2 decades ago, and she has revised and updated to make it a little more appropriate for today. And they've got an all-new 4th volume coming soon. And then this has actually been originally published, let's see, I've got to get this correctly. Sherlock Holmes, The Dark Detective. In the US, Caliber Comics reprinted the first 4 issues, which was Sherlock Holmes versus Cthulhu. And this was Chris Ciccara, Oscar winner Dave Elsey, and Philip Cornell, with an art assist from Jan Scherpenheisen, who is working on The Human Fly as well. So it's a tribute to Holmes and Hammer-esque horror. The print editions have never been published outside of Australia. And it's, let's see, printed by Holmes, and it's also a reference to The Moonstone, Wilkie Collins' proto-horror story. And it's the first British detective novel. From issue number 5 on, material has never been published in any format outside of Australia. And it takes place once the first arc is done, will take place during the years of the Shadow War between Holmes and Moriarty. So in Australia, it was published by Black House Comics originally. There were 8 issues total, but that were published, and Chris is adding on to the end. The first 4 were picked up by Caliber, as I mentioned here, 5, 6, 7, 8, and now 9, plus a special is coming, still planned for the US. And the second arc is called The Knights of Frankenstein, with a very different take on the monster. So another book that, I get to say this, I'm looking forward to, because I haven't seen anything beyond this slide. And I do just want to mention, because I think I got to for Chris's sake, that in a couple of weeks, the trade paperback of his Star Trek: The Next Generation graphic novel is coming out, Halloween, which was released weekly, I think, last year for Halloween. So looking forward to that. And now, I know this is what Alan and Craig and Tony have been waiting for, is we're going to talk.
Me and Jim. What are we, chopped liver?
Well, we're gonna, yeah, you too.
Well, I am.
And the big gun coming out, if you don't mind my saying gun, is the human fly. The wildest, correct me if I get the tagline wrong, the wildest superhero of them all, say it with me, because he's real. And I was talking with Jim last week, and I said, like, Marvel Comics had originally licensed the stuntman, and they gave him an origin, I think, very similar to what turned out what they gave Wolverine. Like, you know, his entire body his skeleton had been replaced with metal.
Wolverine copied the human fly.
That's what I'm
It
saying.
should be Deadpool and human fly.
Yes.
The one thing they had in common was that, yeah, the human fly in the original story by Bill Mantlo from Marvel was a performer who was driving in North Carolina in a storm with his family and had a car crash and had his body parts, his bones replaced by steel, which made him extra tough and durable, and he rehabilitated himself and became a stuntman or daredevil in order to help people in need. That's the Marvel origin story.
That's kind of kick-ass, too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
True. Yeah. Everybody copied him.
So I think the human Wolverine doesn't sound very good.
No. Wolverine Man. So this new comic takes place in the modern day, and it's in continuity with the original Marvel comics, but we've created a whole new universe and backstory. There are two stories. The second one is written by me. First one by Chris, and we really widened out the narrative to give the Fly a background that allows him to wander through history, through a long history, which allows us to go beyond 78 and 77. He's still a daredevil. His identity is still a secret. We never know who he is, but we're starting to leave clues throughout the stories.
And this is the Zero issue, which...
Yes, this is the first issue, which is special issue 0, available now, although I understand most of them are sold out already. And the
congratulations.
Issue 0. Issue 1, I believe, will be available in October.
In October,
right
yes.
around the time of New York Comic Con.
Yes.
So for issue 1 with a very special cover. I don't know.
I'm about to reveal that cover.
Oh, you are going to reveal it.
I have been given permission.
This is issue 0.
Yes, and kudos to you. I love the expanded backstory, and there's I can't remember, some character in there actually says to him, "Didn't I meet you when I was a kid?" or something like that. So there's this very mysterious element. It's a really cool Zero
how is
issue.
it that somebody who was performing in the late 1970s is still around performing today? And
Yeah.
is it the same guy? What is his story?
I'm just going to say
And
Tom
it'll be up
Jones.
to these two guys to figure out how to tell you that story.
That's right.
Wait, no, I do have a question though. Is anyone familiar with the original Human Fly comics or the real person that the comics were based on?
Yeah, who knows?
Except for you two right
Who
there.
knows about the human fly here?
Anybody?
Is it
Well,
just
so I
us
feel
on
like
this
we-
panel?
Yeah, so maybe we need a little
Yeah, so
backstory on the real person.
Let me take 2 minutes. The Human Fly comic, which was originally published by Marvel in the late 70s, was based on a real person that dressed up in a superhero costume, albeit a little less slick looking than the ones in the comics, made by somebody's grandma, I believe, and was doing daredevil stunts, death-defying stunts, if you will. The first one, and the most famous one, being that he stood on the top of a DC-8 jet and flew standing on top of the fuselage as the plane flew.
Sorry to interrupt. It's important to know, he wasn't a stuntman though. This was just like a guy who got an idea and was kind of inspired by Evel Knievel at the time and was like, I could do that. And so it's this kind of concocted costume and he got this idea, he had to strap himself to the top of this jet. And people were like, this guy is wild. So yeah, he was not a stuntman.
He was a stuntman
He
wannabe.
claimed to be a former Hollywood stuntman, but he wasn't. And the manager, investor, put him in this suit and arranged for these stunts. And it was a crazy story because then.
And he attempted to beat Evel Knievel's record by jumping over 26 school buses on a jet-powered motorcycle at Montreal's Olympic Stadium and wiped out spectacularly. So if you look up the Human Fly 101 on YouTube, you can see the footage.
Yes.
And so while all this was going on, they managed to license the character to Marvel for about a 24-issue run, creating fans like Eisner winner Jim Krueger, who was
I'm just glad there aren't two Grand Canyons.
That you know.
And so he became world famous, and we've been working to bring him back for several years. There is a feature film in development and a podcast / YouTube platform that will debut in the next couple of weeks. It exists in French for Quebec, but I imagine nobody here would understand it, so the English one's coming out pretty soon too.
Yeah, take offense. She speaks French.
Who does?
Mais oui.
So look it up, you can find it now, and it's on, and there's some videos on TikTok.
And when we spoke last year, I think there was a documentary in progress, or is that what this YouTube channel
It is moving along very slowly. There's a company in the UK that is working on getting a documentary made, or a mini-series documentary, and it's been kind of creeping along. It's hard to explain, but part of the agenda for the so-called buyers, the streamers that might have decided to buy this documentary and finance it, wanted to know that there was sort of a current contemporary end to the story. Because, as Tony pointed out, he wiped out, he did make it to the second round, but he made it under the second round instead of on it. He went to the hospital, and a few days later he disappeared. Yeah. And nobody had seen him since. In any case, they wanted to know, well, where is he? Is he dead? Is he alive? And there was a nationwide search throughout Canada, where he's from. And articles in the newspaper, TV interviews with Tony and others about where he is. Anyway, and I think I can say that they believe they know where he is. I can't really give you any specific details.
In order to protect his family without being asked.
But in any case, the documentary is still, in theory, going, but we don't really know where it will stream or where it will appear.
Okay, I mean, because your stories and the Marvel comics are really fun, but to me, like, the real story is still wild.
Well, okay, so the real story, though, is what Tony based the feature film script on. And
Okay.
although it is greatly exaggerated for entertainment purposes and has a lot of fantasy in it, it is ultimately built around the real story of the real guys who did this crazy stuff back in the 70s, the manager and the...
Well, and that's a crazy story too about the manager and Joe.
Which
If you
story?
would like to
Right.
expand.
Which story are you referring to?
Well, I don't think anyone knows about the sausage making family and where they got the money for all these stunts. Like, it is really one of these stories of truth being stranger than fiction.
That's right.
It's really
Abe
weird.
Froman, the Sausage King of Chicago, was involved in
There
this.
were.
See, I was going to go Sweeney Todd with
The
that.
Ramasieri brothers, who ran Roma Foods, which is a sausage making company. And what had happened was that one of their employees complained to them that his sister had married this guy who claimed he was a stuntman, who turned out to be a bigamist, and could they settle him in some way? And so the deal they came to was that he would get into this costume and perform life-threatening stunts, which he did.
It was either hot dogs or the human fly. All right.
Well, I'm just thinking, I guess a bigamist would have to make sausages. No? Bad? I'm sorry.
A little bit, but
You know, I want to say one more element that's interesting about these stories, about the character in general, is something that Jim has a great take on, and in terms of why, one of the reasons why you love this character and want to be involved, was something that you said back when when Tony and I first met with you a couple of years ago, which was, you don't remember, what?
I don't remember.
Well, basically you said,
Now you can make up
the best
anything.
thing about, the greatest thing about Human Fly is he doesn't give up. He never gives
Oh, yeah.
up.
No.
He's a human. He's not he has no superpowers. And he's a lot less than he claims to be. And yet, he just doesn't give up, and he keeps fighting, and it doesn't matter you know, the backstory of the Human Fly is that he was in a car crash with his family and the rest of his family died and he was supposed to die, but through sheer determination and willpower, he survived, and then they rebuilt his body out of 60% out of steel or something, and then he just is relentless and never gives up, and that's
Yeah, and in the news story,
one of his defining, even when it's stupid not to give up, he doesn't give up.
I should point out that in the news story, what we underline a lot is that he's a showman. He's surrounded by a great tactical team. He performs amazing stunts. Our Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, is in the first issue. So it takes place in our time and in a real time and place. And that blending of reality and fiction is a big part of what makes this character interesting. We had a panel this morning, and something that struck us while we were out looking at other panels is the design of the character.
I wanted to touch on that.
Cool design, yeah.
Yeah.
And so we've started to create merch over, more recently, because this iconic kind of red and white mask thing is, I think, pretty special. And I know that as a kid for years I've been drawing it, and so we're really going to try to get this.
Yeah, but what I loved about Jan Scherpenheisen's work in the Zero issue is the costume actually makes a lot more sense, whereas in the 70s in Marvel it was the typical spandex and the real guy. You didn't see a lot of of course that was the 70s too, we didn't expect our superheroes to be like these huge roid kings, but that it's like he is trying to protect himself. The mask now is much more of a helmet. Yeah. And it was just for a second, I'm like, that doesn't look quite right. And then the deeper I got into the story, I was like, this makes absolute sense. And for the backstory, the mystery you're building, it also makes a lot more sense to have this. So I love that. I don't know if Tony, you were the one who said, no, this got to be this way or not, but
it's been a real collaborative effort. We wanted Chris to do his own thing, and we always want the writers to do their own thing. Take a supervisory role, so make sure that it makes sense. There's a whole historical angle that came out of my story that is part of the larger story that when Chris saw my story, he incorporated his story. Yeah. So it's collaboration for sure.
Great. So I think at this moment, because we're all waiting for who is this #1 variant cover artist. And I'm so thrilled to be able to announce that we've got, I say we, Bill Sienkiewicz is doing the variant cover #1. So that'll be out for New York Comic Con, and that's pretty exciting. And I should mention, of course, then that the first arc is by Chris Sequeira and Jan Scherpenheisen, who I think continues. And W. Chu Chan will be doing other variant covers, which I think I get to show some of those. But Dana and Jim are doing the second arc, I think taking over from issue #5.
Well, no, I think that Chris is going through issue 4 as the plan. And then, the second arc, I believe the plan right now is for Jim to do the second arc and Dana to do the
third arc. Oh, okay.
Yeah, because Dana's got to fix all my mistakes.
Sorry?
Dana's got to fix all my
She's
mistakes.
She's going to fix your mistakes.
Yes.
Every single one.
Okay. All right. So one thing that I don't recall, because it's been a long time since I had the original Marvel comics, I don't recall him really having an arch enemy, because every good superhero needs one. And I know you have approved this character, so we get to reveal this too. He not in the Zero issue, but will be appearing a villain named Fire Sword. As I said, I know that you two had to do approval. So can you talk about Fire Sword and why he's the right villain for the Human Fly?
The fact is, it's really in Chris's wheelhouse and his brain as to what Fire Sword is really going to be about and represent, but other than what's obvious from his look. Unless you have something further to say about that.
Well, as a hirsute man, I'm happy to see my community represented.
Here's to the hirsuits.
There is another villain in issue #1 called Mr. Tweed, who is a recurring character in the whole franchise. But Chris is actually right. There was no strong antagonist to the Fly. Now we'll have at least one, if not two. We want to build out a Rose Gallery. And we're also building out his team. Like there's a lot, he has a sidekick, Mercury, and on his technical crew, and they're all kind of going to play important roles.
You know, I'm gonna, because you had one in the original Marvel series too. Marvel stole from this series so much. You got Wolverine, but the Punisher had his team too, and that was after the Human Fly. So here's to Bill Mantlo.
I stole from the original series too.
Oh, well, I know, Jim.
Yeah.
But that's
So Daredevil in Earth X continuity was based completely on kind of a cross of Ghost Rider and the Human Fly, and Daredevil, of course, but
Right.
really the Human Fly.
When Ghost Rider was in the original,
yeah, it's in the original Marvel
original
run.
Human Fly run, yeah?
Yeah.
In the original Marvel run of the Human Fly, Ghost Rider, Spider-Man,
Daredevil.
Daredevil,
White Tiger.
White Tiger. Now, last year we did a panel at another hotel, and they mentioned then that they are trying to get the rights to kind of create a Human Fly omnibus of the Marvel years.
Yes.
I don't know where that stands, but if you could give us a little preview.
It hasn't progressed much, but as far as the way the structure is, Tony and I literally co-own all of those Marvel comics with Marvel.
It's a very special copyright arrangement that they had with the owners of the Human Fly. It doesn't exist with any other Marvel properties.
It's very weird, sorry to interrupt, but like if you go on the Marvel website where they have the MCU, the Human Fly is the only character listed on the Marvel website as like not actually being
not
in
part of
the
the
universe.
Right.
Yeah, so the way it breaks down is that we own every page except the pages that Marvel characters appear on.
Other Marvel characters.
Yeah, other Marvel, real, not licensed Marvel characters. So Spider-Man, Ghost Rider, etc. Those are, we can't reproduce those, but the rest we own, which is very unique.
So, yeah.
Well, I
know
hope that
Chris and
Impress
Jerry are
could-
still working on, it's been very slow getting
Okay, someday,
progress made with
because
Marvel,
I'll
but
tell
they're still working
you,
on it.
in this year alone, we've seen books that I thought would never get reprinted from Marvel. You know, we got the Micronauts back, we got ROM back, and they're about to release their Godzilla books again, which also
And the
ties-
DC Marvel stuff is
and
coming
the
on
DC
the bus.
and that is Satan called me and said, "Turn up the heat a little bit, please."
Wow.
Because
he
it is
called me too.
cold. Did he?
Yeah.
All right.
He
So-
doesn't call me.
Anyway, so here are some covers that includes they're by Jan Scherbenheisen, and I personally, because I love Gold Key books, that's my childhood. That issue number 3, I think that's issue number 3 cover is it just got me good. So this is some really cool stuff. They're homages.
Can I say something about these?
Yeah.
So I love these. I think they're so fun. We're trying to create with these stories like not throwbacks, but good old-fashioned comics that we used to enjoy in the day. And what they've done with these covers is these are homage covers, right? So the one to the left is a homage to the Carmen Infantino Batman and Robin cover. The second one from the left is a homage to Jim Steranko. The third one, I'm not sure.
No, it's Gold Key.
Gold Key?
It's like a Man from U.N.C.L.E. cover. I can't remember.
Yeah.
And then the last one is Steve Ditko. It's a very
Spider-Man Daredevil.
Yeah, Spider-Man Daredevil. So this is, it's so fun.
Jim knows his stuff. Yeah.
And when they sent these to me, I was like, what do you think? It's like, they're great. They're just great. Keep it coming. It's so fun. So it's just something that we hope fans will respond to. And
Oh yeah. So let's focus this. All of you come to the Human Fly from different areas, right? Obviously we know, Jim, who also went on to write for Marvel. Grew up reading these comics. So what? Tony, you're the one that got the franchise reinvigorated. So give you all due credit for that. And Dana, you're a comic book nerd, and as we all are, that is not an insult. Thank God we are here in San Diego, where
Thank
it's
goodness,
like
there's no one else like us here.
they should be carrying us around, right? Then Jim, obviously, you've done a lot of work in the comics world. What was your path to the Human Fly, and how did you get involved with this publishing company with IPI?
When I was, I'm a screenwriter as well of many films that were never made. And at one point I was working with a producer who said to me, you know, if you can find a project that is a blend of fiction and documentary, there's a fund that Telephone Canada where I can get money back as a director. And I remembered The Human Fly, and I don't know why I remembered this, but I had a feeling that he was from Montreal. And when I was 12 when he first appeared, and I can remember being in high school and a friend of mine, Steve Coutier, coming in and saying, "Have you heard about The Human Fly? There's a real superhero out there." And it just felt so unreal that there was a real superhero. It just grabbed me. So years later, I investigated it. My brother, one of my brothers is a journalist, and we tracked down the rights to Roma Foods and Ram Sierras. And I said, this story has got to be told. It's crazy. So that's what got us started on this. And then, as we've been developing the project over the years, I was really interested in the backstory. I wasn't a huge fan of the original series, but I found out that a lot of people were very fond of the characters. So, I wanted to see.
But you were a fan of Frank Robbins. We established that this morning.
Who liked the Frank Robbins Invaders? Anybody?
Wait, what's that?
The Frank Robbins Invaders books?
Oh my gosh, they're the best comics ever.
Okay.
Best comics ever.
Yeah, I know.
Well, he's an interesting artist. It's the time. I think Jim, you and I were talking about this. That it's like time for reevaluation. When you were a kid in the '70s, he was kind of like, oh, it's kind of interesting. It's weird. It's different. And now you're like, that guy knew what he was doing.
And haven't you noticed that I think artists spend so much time looking at themselves in the mirror, looking at their hand, learning how to draw, and like I've just noticed that artists look like themselves. Like
Very
they
true.
draw like themselves. And what's really funny about Frank Robbins and his like extended is if you talk to Frank, he'd be like this, and he'd be like constantly like stretching his body in weird shapes and weird like angles with his arms and his legs, and that's how he draws figures.
He looked like one of Vecna's victims in Stranger Things,
Wow.
And Captain America doing this, and
Yeah.
Shadow, and anyway.
It was interesting. It was interesting. So Dana, how about you?
How did I come to? Oh yeah, so I'm a, like I said before, TV writer, screenwriter, and have worked on a lot of shows, and always read comics and loved comics, but didn't know anyone in comics, and was like, oh, I'll just always be a fan. And so got into writing comics specifically through Jim, because we met at Wired Cafe, and we're drinking at Wired Cafe together. Rest in peace, Wired Cafe. And long story short, that's what brought me into the Neon Future comic where I met Jim. So lucky for that. But The Human Fly in particular, through connections, through friends and family, heard about the story because I was not around when the comics were coming out. I'm a bit younger than some of the other panelists here, but learned about it, and was very fascinated at first by the real life story. I think that was Tony's journey into, where I was like, this guy's crazy. Yeah, I do recommend, by the way, anyone who hasn't watched, and I think it's most of you, who haven't watched the Real Human Fly stuff online. It's really wild, because there's his crazy stunt stuff that he did, but he also would go and do TV interviews in character, in the costume. Like, he's on CBS Sports Spectacular doing this really bizarre interview in this bedazzled homemade suit where like the seams don't even match up and his posture is all weird, and give yourself a treat when you get home.
There was a Beach Boys special during that period, and The Human Fly, one of his stunts, was featured on it. So he was world famous.
He
Like
jumped
a viral
the Beach Boys?
star, like a real viral star at the time before that was the thing. It was like the rise to fame was so fast, and then the crash, like the literal crash, was so fast.
He used to say, I'm the greatest daredevil that ever lived and that ever will live, which was sort of an odd thing to say. That was his
Tempting fate.
Yeah.
So sorry, I did skip over you, Alan.
Well, that's okay. Not being a comic book writer or a screenwriter, it started for me with a mutual friend of Tony's and mine, unfortunately has passed now, who knew that Tony was working on, before the comic situation was developing, working on this film that Tony was writing and then wrote, and he was a director. And I'm a producer and kind of more on the business side and organizational side. And it was this mutual friend that introduced me to Tony and brought me in at first, again, to put a movie project together, which all these years later is finally coming together. But in the interim, this plan to relaunch the comic developed. We had actually met Chris Sequeira a number of years ago and tried to do a different version of it, and then ultimately, when Chris became the editor-in-chief, not only is he a writer, but the editor-in-chief of IPI, he got back in touch with us and said, guys, listen, I've got a comic book company now. You guys want to go with
That's
that?
convenient, yeah.
And it was like, okay, we'll do that. But really it started for me as a film, a movie producer, connecting with Tony and developing the feature film project.
I have to say, Chris couldn't come here from Australia this year, but one of the things that was that impressed me so much about Chris was his real passion to do this. And he pursued us for a long time to do this project. And one of the most inspiring things that's come out of this project in the last few months and years is how many people are passionate about it and passionate about the character. And that's a wonderful thing to see. People pursuing what they love and really giving their time and giving their all. It's kind of special about this industry, I would say.
I could say, much like the human fly, Chris Sequeira never gives up either.
Oh,
He
absolutely
didn't go
not.
up, and now this is happening.
Yeah.
Yep.
Jim, you've shared a lot about your history with the book, but what was it for the human fly for you? It was just, he was real?
He was real, and I felt like he could die. Marvel superheroes, at any point, I thought, the next issue's going to come out, and then I'm going to find out that he died. Like there was something about true risk taking, and it was scary. Like, I was scared for the human fly as a kid, and there's something thrilling when you're scared for your hero.
And in the spirit of Marvel, do you want to say that Chris was teasing me, and I was going to say this, that you have some plans, that's all we can say at this point, because nothing has been set in stone. Instead of IPI team up, it's amazing alliances. So the idea perhaps the human fly could cross over with a character much like the Hammer version of Dracula, but not the Hammer version. So he's promised me a lot of different things. But to that, you three are working on another project that may come out. It's just two. Well,
Just Dana and I.
okay. You and Dana then, Alan, are working on another character or licensed property that may come out through IPI Comics. And I know there's not a lot you can say, but whatever you can.
Sure, I'll start and let Dana jump in. It's based on a novella that I have the rights to for other media outside of straight-ahead written word. And so that means movies, TV, and graphic novels, comics, whatever. And that property actually has already spawned, if you will, a feature film screenplay that Dana co-wrote. And is a very interesting sci-fi, horror, surreal, fantasy, sci-fi, crazy world that's created, which it's a very interesting hybrid kind of project. And I was talking to Chris and Jerry about it, and said, boy, I actually, it was last year when I saw some of the other projects they were developing that was more monsters and that sort of stuff. Because all I really was in conversation with them about was the human fly up to that point, and I thought on the IPI panel last year, wow, this project could really be a cool IPI property in comics and graphic novels. And they took an interest, and we've been talking about it ever since. And because Dana wrote this screenplay, that's really wonderful. That we're still working on, trying to get it financed and get it produced. I thought, well, Dana could sort of take the lead, and I'll let her talk a little bit more about her. I mean, we aren't. First of all, it's not a done deal, so we're not promising that this will be
Right,
an
right, we're
IPI
being
release,
vague
but
and
it is-
specific at the same time, yes.
Yeah,
It is in very serious conversation and in development, art-wise and otherwise.
Why don't you tell us more about it?
Well, I was just gonna say, I don't know what I'm allowed to say, so I'm not gonna say much, but it is really cool, and I don't know if there's like a IPI Comics handle or place to follow, but I think the through line
How would you
here,
describe sort of the world, if you can, even?
yeah, it's like genre bendy, demons and time travel, and two hitmen on the craziest job of their lives. But yeah, I don't know, but I think that's what's so great about IPI Comics is there's like such a big library of really fun, cool genre bendy stuff.
I think we can say demons, time travel, and gangsters.
Yeah.
All in one. So, you know, the title of this was Heroes, Horror, and Homes, and we get back to horror for some of this. They Call Me Midnight, and I failed to mention in Jim's holiday, his Christmas anthology, the cover is by John K. Snyder III, who has been kind of missing from comics for a while, and IPI got them back, so got him back. Nancy Holder and Alan Phillipson and John K. Snyder III will be doing a book called They Call Me Midnight. This other piece, Veil of Tears. We had talked last year about Frankenstein Monstrance, and then Jerry Huntman, who is the publisher of IPI Comics, mentioned a couple days ago the Matron, which they're just looking for an artist and signing contracts right now. And what I love about it was this is an Australian company, and I've lived in California my entire life. Both writers are people I've been friends with for years from Texas. It's David Bowles and Drew Edwards. Drew is known for a book called Halloween Man, which has been around for 24 years. I think he's been self-publishing this thing. And I reached out to him this morning because he couldn't make it, but he told me it's some of the best writing of both of his and David's careers, and David's got quite a career as a novelist, and he says possibly the birth of a new horror icon, so I cannot wait to see what happens with the Matron. It's going to be both in comic shops and available on globalcomics.com. I just wanted to add that in. It's not that this is a panel for that, but that is a fantastic online service which has a lot of the indie stuff. And if you're craving something different, Global Comics I am in no way paid or know anybody there. But other than Drew publishes Halloween Man through them now. It's a terrific site, and Image runs a lot of books through there too, and I guess IPI Comics will be running books through there. And that's very exciting, because if you are someone who has a garage full of comics like I do, you may be switching to digital where you can, and this might be the way to do it. So, before we have just, I think, about 5 minutes left. Does anyone have any questions for the panel?
Yes, sir, go to the mic.
Look, there's a mic, yes.
When it comes to the human fly, being based on a real person, how does that affect, I guess, your approach into describing or ascribing attributes and characteristics to the fictional version, and keeping that balance between who he was and also maybe respecting the person behind that mask, but then the fictional character? Thanks.
Well, he's we were talking about it today, he's a reverse Walter Mitty. Like the position we're taking is that the real life person in our meta story was a secret identity, was a false identity, a false flag. That the real hero is truly heroic and not crazy, though he keeps his identity secret. So that's part of our meta story. We're also, you mentioned that it's an equivalent to Dracula. I love the idea that there are real life, and this came from Philip Jose Farmer, but that there are real life equivalents to heroes like Tarzan and Doc Savage, and they really existed. To us, the human fly is part of that lineage. He really existed. He really was heroic, and he really was related to these characters who really exist. The fact that the human fly is real makes this character unique among all characters in heroic fiction. And that's going to be something we'll keep touching on again and again, and we hope that every story has an historical element. And so, in fact, just to point it out, the producer in the second story exists. She's Lucy Wallace. So I want these guys and our team to always,
Bring in real world.
bring in the real world. This is a story that takes place in the real world, and the real world can be pretty fantastic.
And if you're not already connected to them, I can hook you up with the Wold Newton Society. That's Philip Jose Farmer's group that believes that all fictional, semi-fictional, real characters existed. And if you haven't read those books, they will blow your mind.
And I would also say, in answer to your question, like, we're into this because we love superheroes. We're into this because we love the costume. We're into this because we love the mask. Like those things have to be still there, but at the same time, maybe the stakes have to be more real. Because this isn't to sell it's not to sell kids' pajamas,
Not yet.
Yeah, right. I mean, I'm waiting for the action figure because that's my weakness.
T-shirts for sale.
Yeah. Well, we do have to wrap up at this point. Thank you all. This has been a great panel. And thank you all for attending. Have a great rest of the con.
Oh, can I say one more thing?
You can, Jim.
Oh, one more thing.